there are a number of extenuating circumstances which we took into account, which led us to arrive at the decision of maintaining it at 13.5% for 2024. In July, inflation actually increased to 15.4% terms, whereas the bottom part gives us the reading of inflation as at end of period. So turning to the upper part, you note that the average inflation, as I indicated, has risen to 14.6%. This is the last column on that chart, on that table, and it has moved from 13.5 the previous quarter. Now, if you look at the components of that, clearly you see that food is the major driver, which has moved to 16.2% from 14.5%. Non-food inflation, on the other hand, it has gone up, but not by that significant magnitude, from 12.1% to 12.3%. Now, when we turn to end period numbers over the same period, we again note that inflation to end June, that is, moved to 15.2% from 13.7% in the second quarter or March, 2%. So the storage, particularly fuel, due to constrained supply, continued. There an issue, but more importantly, OPEC and OPEC Plus also cut back their production, which pushed the price of the commodity up. We show this. This is where, I don't know if you can read it, but I think when you get a chance to get the thing, I can't also read from here, so I have to go to my cheat table here. What you see, actually the top line there on both, the chart on the left here, chart 1, is the average over the period into the second quarter. That is, we are talking the period of 3 months, whereas the right-hand one is just showing the July position. So what you see here, I think if it is really enlarged, the line that is protruding on both charts, the top one is referring to breakfast meal, which is the meal meal, which is common in the country as staple, followed by mushrooms in the left-hand side, and the other vegetables and the food items. So really, what is the point of showing this? I think that's the significance of it, is to demonstrate that the pressures that we are seeing in the prices of commodities is coming from a number of areas, but there are key ones which drive this. So if you look at the top there, it's in a descending order, meaning in smaller bits. But when you look at the month of July, you will see also at the bottom that there are prices, there are commodities whose prices have actually come down. That's what compensates when you come to measuring the average. So you have a chance to look at this more closely when you get the presentation. But the point is that food is a major driver, so is fuel. We see the fuel showing up in the transportation, which in effect is also affected by the exchange rate to a large extent. So moving on, I will now look at the outlook. What we note is that when we last met here in May, the inflation was projected to move into the 6 to target band in this. Again begs the question why we iterate. The red line is the projection that we are making at this meeting. Clearly understand too that this target band is applying to the medium term, as well as we are moving now towards that. So it's not that it's the same information but presented in absolute figures. So the first row there after the years shows what the projection is in August, what we are saying in expected in the first half of 2026, which completes the forecast horizon, and there we estimate it or project it to be averaging 10.8%. Clearly all those are above the target band. The other row is the projection in May, as I indicated, where we had projected that inflation was going to be 13.7% in 2024 and reduce to 9.8% in 2025, which at that time was the end period for our forecast horizon. So the bottom line is that inflation is building up, and the drivers of that are exchange rate, food, and oil prices. We are also giving you what we see are the risks which could push inflation further up. So what we say is that key upside risks to inflation outlook remain broadly unchanged. That means those factors that we have highlighted as the current drivers, if they persist and even get more intense, they could contribute to a further rise in inflation. So what we are saying is that this extended hours of electricity load management is having quite an impact, or could, if it continues, have that effect on inflation as well. We also continue to see geopolitical conflicts and the tight global financial conditions. Here we are not saying that these will continue. What we are saying is that if these continue, they have that potential to drive inflation up. So it is in our collective effort, there are all the policy rates, but inflation, we're better positioned in terms of inflation, and global inflation, the dollar moderated further to 3.8% from 10.6% in the first quarter of this year. This is shown in the chart on the right, chart 4. If you look at the black continuous line there, that's what is showing. If you look at the end there, is whereas you see, if you look when it appreciated, if you have sharp highs, you see down there that was somewhere in April, February, when it had appreciated quite considerably, but then it started to depreciate. You can see the sharp rise, and it reached a peak, came down again, went up, and what we are looking at is the last or the tail end of that line, which shows that there is some moderation in the movement of the exchange rate. The slowdown that we observed was attributed to improved supply of foreign exchange, particularly from the mining sector, and moderation in demand. The moderation in demand may be attributed to the measures that I referred to that we took to organize the foreign exchange market better. Here you recall that we made some changes to the trading arrangements in the interbank market or buy $1 million, they should take the board rates as given. It's only those who have those amounts larger than, who are wholesalers, who can move the exchange rate. We had seen a situation where even small amounts were moving the exchange rate. Yes, it might have been good for you as an individual business or an individual, but it was not good for the entire economy, because we are raising the price of the dollar to everybody else, because the exchange rate is determined in the aggregate. So if there is that movement, we all pay the price. So this is what we are aiming to do. And we are saying too that if you are not a dealer in foreign exchange, which is a regulated service, please use the official channels to exchange your dollars. This is not to say that you cannot hold dollars, euro, pound, or any other foreign currency. All we are saying is that when you want to transact, go to an official outlet and do your transactions. The other thing we saw contributing to the recovery of the kwacha against the dollar during this period was that in June, the IMF did complete the third review of our extended credit facility arrangement. That is a very significant development, in that we have had now 3 successful completion of the reviews. It happens sometimes that the review cannot be completed, and that could be due to the fact that the program is considered to have gone off track. So what this means is that if the review is concluded positively, it means that the authorities and we here, the Zambian people, are implementing the program that we set for ourselves. And that is an important signal to the rest of the world that Zambia is managing its affairs very well. You also note that during this period, the debt restructuring, particularly to the bond holders, was concluded. And in fact, we made payment, or the first payment in June, for the bond A that was exchanged. I think as the Minister and the Minister of Finance colleagues have explained, what happened, the restructuring required to consolidate all the 3 bonds that we had, and then issue 2 bonds with new terms, bond A and bond B. So bond A was required us to make an upfront payment for that, which was done, and that also resulted in us getting some favorable rating from the credit rating agencies. And this is what spread into the market and encouraged the people to say that Zambia is back on track. So these developments are not trivial, they are quite significant in the financial setting. Now, in the third quarter, however, the kwacha has depreciated by 6% so far, up to 13th of August. 13th of August is just yesterday. So we are giving you more or less up to the minute information. Now, supply and demand tend not to be always matched, but we get encouragement that one of the major sources of foreign exchange is the mining sector. And there are important developments that have taken place there and are still taking place, which gives us the optimism that going forward supply would be enhanced. We also implemented since January the EBOP, the export tracking framework and export tracking framework. This we are capturing important information, but there is quite some other things that we need to do for full compliance. But it must also be, we must quickly add that the arrangement is that the returns after one has exported should be made within 90 days. But if there are some challenges, which are credible challenges, they are given some extension to make the filing at a later date. And the training on the use of the system is ongoing. So far, some good progress is being made. But we are eagerly awaiting for the conclusion of the national ID as opposed just to the TPIN, because the TPIN is subject to a lot of manipulation. So for us to really to get a robust tracking of this, we need to get an ID that is not assailable. Further, we are saying that during the period under review, we received an increased amount from the mining sector, which was $252.5 million from $190.8 million in the first quarter. So this is what I referred to, that some supply had improved. Now, because of this improved supply, obviously our support to the market has to be adjusted as well. So we are saying that during the period, market supply on the right-hand side of the screen. Further information in the foreign exchange market is how are we faring in terms of gross international reserves. What we are saying is that our reserves stand at $3.9 billion, which is equivalent to 4.3 months of import cover as at the end of June this year. This is an improvement from the earlier amount reported of 3.6 billion kwacha, dollars, which was equivalent to 3.9 months of import cover. The major contributor to this increase in the reserves during this period was the disbursement of $569.6 million from the IMF. You recall in the earlier media or press reports, the IMF augmented also their support to the country following the drought that we referred to. They provided an augmentation of 30% of the quota. That's why this amount is as high as it is. It is also important to stress here that this money was divided into two major components, 50-50 setting. The first 50% was for budget support. You recall that the government, the Minister of Finance, went to Parliament in June to review or adjust the budget for the year, taking into account the drought that we are facing. So the IMF also made that contribution. So 50% of that was to go towards assisting government to meet the requirements for food and sustaining livelihoods. The other 50% is what is used to support our reserves holdings here. In the second quarter, this is a question you always ask during these meetings. So how are we doing in terms of gold holdings? What we are saying is that during the quarter, we purchased gold amounting to $8.6 million. This brings the total holdings to $176.7 million since we started this program. Now, this figure fluctuates depending on the current price of gold. So sometimes you may see a higher figure. That's because of the price which has changed, because we have to continuously value it at the current prices. So as at that time, this is what the holdings we had were translating to in money terms. We now move to another very important part of our economy. This is relating to credit developments. I think this whole idea of the monetary policy rate is in a way targeted at this, because if we have credit going, the expectation is that there will be increased economic activity in the economy. So what we are saying is that during the period under review, we saw a pickup in the growth of credit, domestic credit, that is to 11.7% from 10.5% at the end of March. This is shown on the chart on the right, which is chart 7, where we show year to year, but this is the contributions of different segments. So the blue shading there refers to private sector credit, and the one in red, is it red or orange? That's the government, the central government borrowing. So what is important here is to see that in the earlier years, government was very dominant in terms of getting credit, but in the recent times, more credit is going to the private sector. In fact, if you look at the tail end of this chart, we see that government is even in negative territory. What does that mean? It means that there is a repayment of some of that debt, notably in government securities. The government has been paying down some of that debt. Now, isolating private sector credit, we see that in nominal terms, it expanded by 35.8%. Really, we would like to see these figures in real terms, because once we take valuation effects into account here, you see that the real growth is not as high. It's around 15% or so. So this is one of the reasons why we felt that it was necessary to maintain the policy rate, because credit is still, growth is still quite anemic, and as you see in the next slides, economic activity is as well constrained. So the lending to the government, as I said, contracted as the government paid down some of the maturing securities, which gives some headroom to the government going forward. The question we also always get is what is the holding of non-residents in our government securities. So this slide is devoted to showing how we are doing there. So if you look at the blue bars there, that's what reflects the non-resident holdings. The brown shows the total outstanding stock of government securities. So you can see that the blue bars have remained fairly constant, and in fact going slightly down towards the end. Now, when we break it down in terms of what is it really that they are holding, we see that they are concentrated in bonds pretty much. But another interesting aspect is that it's most of this is in 10 years and above. So we give you for 3 years, they have 1.5 billion kwacha, which represents 2.8% of the total, and so on. So that's what this table is trying to show. So you see that the bulk of the holdings are in 10 years tenor. Now, this is important also to pause a minute to understand what is this revealing. I think what the players in this market are saying is that they have some reasonable optimism going forward. That's why they are putting their money long term. So this is very important for us here. If we get more long-term money, it means that we have the opportunity to use that money, and if we use it productively, we must be able to create the capacity to repay that when it matures. So the longer the tenor, the better in terms of giving the space within which to repay. But what is critically important is how do you use that money? Because if you don't use it properly, obviously it will hurt you when it is time to repay. Turning to economic activity, as I indicated already, it was weak in the second quarter as business conditions deteriorated in the wake of the adverse impact of the drought. So on the right there, we see the chart which provides the projections for growth. You note that in 2024 particularly, growth has really been downgraded from an earlier projection of, I think, 4.4%. We are now talking of 2.3%. That's a dip which is not sitting well with us, because we need to be growing at higher rates and consistently. But we have to recognize that we have been gripped by a shock which we did not expect, the drought, and the severity of this has been immense in agriculture and energy. I think I did allude to the fact that extended load management is one of the key risks that we see happening to our inflation. So here, what we are saying that growth has been weak, and the 2024 is particularly worse off. But in the period ahead, we expect some rebound in 2025. That's what the chart there is showing. This is attributed to expected recovery in the mining sector, agriculture. I think there is a lot of emphasis now to do something in agriculture, and the government, through the fiscal measures, has provided some relief for importation of irrigation equipment, also even in the energy side, for the solar equipment, wind related. So all these, once they go into effect, the expectation is that the economy should rebound. Then we see sustained expansion of ICT. I think now it's a foregone conclusion that we are all using technology in literally whatever we are doing. And this is bringing new opportunities to our country, to our people. Financial and insurance sectors are equally punching, one might say, above their weight. But obviously, we are still pressing for more developments in that area. You remember, even before this meeting started, there was an advert running on Go Cashless. That's very important, because once we do that, then financial inclusion will be enhanced. We will also hope and expect that revenue collection can be increased. So we need to transition the informal sector to the formal sector, and the ICT is one of the tools that we can use to achieve that. Conclusion. The MPC decided to maintain the monetary policy rate at 13.5%. We observed that while inflation, the actual and the projection is moving away from the target range, we note that given I hope you get a sense of the other challenges that the economy is facing, we decided to maintain the policy rate at 13.5%, meaning that we judged that the monetary policy stance that currently exists is appropriate. This decision took into account, just to reiterate, the impact of drought as well as the past successive increases. We had increases in the monetary policy rate for the past 6 meetings. So we believe that the impact of those is still working itself through the economy. We also made significant adjustments in the statutory reserve ratio. Last time, I think when we raised this was by 900 basis points. That was quite significant. So these haven't gone away. They are still working their way in the economy. Now, what's happening? Okay. So then the recent reforms, like which I explained in the foreign exchange market, are all put together helping to moderate some of the adverse impact that we are seeing in the economy. But we still have a lot of things to do. So what we are saying is that the continued implementation of fiscal consolidation measures, including completion of the external debt restructuring and the structural reforms, remains critical to lowering inflation, maintaining financial stability, and creating an environment that promotes growth and resilience of the economy against shocks. We need to build buffers in the economy so that not every shock should knock us down. We must be able to resist this, and it can only be done if we all work towards that objective. That's what we are saying. Concerted efforts by all of us are extremely important so that we are pulling in the same direction and to safeguard the macroeconomic stability. Thank you for your attention. God bless.
Thank you very much, Governor, for that presentation. There we have it. The monetary policy rate maintained at 13.5%. We are going to go for the question and answer session. And as always, please raise your hand, indicate the institution that you represent, then you can proceed to ask your questions. We have approximately 50 minutes for this session. We should be able to close this session at 12:50. I want to appreciate Zambian Monitor and Mwebantu Media for the live feeds that you are giving us for this broadcast. So please ask one question so that we give chance to everyone. If you have more than one question, we can take your second and third questions after we have given everyone an opportunity. So who will be the first taker? Kindly remove your mask so that we can be able to hear you properly. And stand, if you can.
I'm Ketra Kalonga from Times of Zambia. I wanted to get an update from BOZ on the local currency regulations, that is de-dollarization, in terms of consultations with stakeholders and the acceptance levels.
What exactly did you want to find out about the currency regulations?
De-dollarization.
What exactly did you want to find out?
Consultations, where you are as BOZ in terms of consultations and how stakeholders are accepting this new development.
Thank you. Next question.
My name is Cecilia Chilowa from Money FM. How does the central bank assess the impact of current trade tensions with Democratic Republic of Congo, which is one of Zambia's key trading partners, on the foreign exchange outlook? How are these tensions influencing the country's monetary stability? Thank you.
We can get the question in this session.
Yeah, good morning, Governor, and good morning, everyone. This is Gerald from Financial Insight Zambia. So my question is on private credit growth. You indicated that private credit growth has grown by 11.7% from 10.5% in Q1. So I was wondering, what are the drivers of this growth in credit? Is it because businesses are investing, or it's more of a distressed kind of borrowing where businesses are trying to deal with the struggles that they're having in making payments and all that because of the current challenges that they are facing in the economy? Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. Governor, you may wish to take those three questions.
Okay. As indicated, with the able colleagues here, who can also help to shed light on some of these. It's interesting that the very first question we are getting is on currency regulations. The thing is that I think you asked rightly that where are we in the consultations? Because I think when we started this process, there was a misbelief that we had already made up our mind, so this was just a formality. But in actual fact is we are engaging stakeholders to get their views on how we implement this measure. What has to be borne in mind as a starting point is that the current law, the Bank of Zambia Act number 5 of 2022, if you look at section 18, it clearly states that the Kwachangwe is the sole legal tender in the Republic, and any other asset that the Bank of Zambia approves. So that's what is motivating us to move forward with this. The other thing is that the penalty, which I think scared many people, that is, how can you just by holding foreign currency be subjected to a 10-year term? That's also provided in the law. Section 74 of the Bank of Zambia Act stipulates that the maximum that can be sanction one can face is 10 years or a penalty or an administrative charge. Now, these things are stated in the law. It doesn't mean that for every infraction you are going to be faced with that. This means that you are gone through the court of competent jurisdiction, and the judge then determines that the offense that is committed is of a grievous nature. That's when you can face that. So, but we tend to get to that. So part of the consultations was to clarify those things, and I think there is a very good understanding now from the groups that we have met. We are continuing the consultations. We hope by end of this month to have, if all goes well, concluded with the consultations. Tomorrow we are meeting 2 groups. We have met a number already. We have yet to go outside Lusaka. As we constantly say, Zambia is not Lusaka. Lusaka is not Zambia. So we have to engage other stakeholders as well. But I think there is a fair amount of appreciation now that we are not talking of exchange control. Far from it. What we are talking about is are transactions of a domestic nature. If I may put it just bluntly, if you say you are going to go and have a hair, you go to the hairdresser, why should you be charged in dollars? If you want to buy water, why should you be charged in dollars? If you want to take a child to school, why should you be charged in dollars? A school which is in here. So these are things we are saying that, in fact, it's not the dollarization per se. What we are saying is promoting the use of the kwacha for our domestic products and services. I think that's a noble call which happens in every economy, that they create these institutions such as the bank, central bank, and the central bank is given the powers to issue currency. Now you can imagine if you are given that authority to issue currency and then that currency doesn't, then why are we spending so much money to print those notes, mint those coins which are used? More importantly, it affects also the very essence of this meeting, which is monetary policy. Because if you are using another country's currency to do transactions, it means that is displacing the local currency, and our ability to manage money supply in the economy is affected adversely. So that's the basic understanding behind that. But now the consultations is to help us how best we can implement this law. So we sincerely mean our consultation. Once we are completed with those consultations, we'll come back and say, this is what we have found out, and based on this finding, this is the direction we are going to go. So far, we haven't implemented any of those, but we are urging Zambians to rise to the occasion that what this is for the use of your own local currency, kwacha and ngwe. Kwacha has a lot of meaning to Zambians from the independence struggle. Kwacha and ngwe, that was the slogan for independence. So why should we lose it? Because we want to have everything denominated in foreign currency. Rise up to that occasion as Zambians to promote the use of your own currency, just like there is Buy Zambia campaign. It's the same kind of campaign we are lodging on the use of the currency. I hope that answers your question. Now, on the trade tensions, I mean, this has just happened, Cecilia, and the active engagement is taking place. You have seen that our Minister of Trade and Commerce, Trade and Industry, and the area minister were out to see their colleagues on the other side, and they are working out some measures. So as yet, I mean, this is just happened, how many days? 1 day, 2 days? So I think it's too early to place a figure on what this does. But the question you're asking is the trade flows. I think the right ministry to indicate that is the Ministry of Commerce and Industry and Zamstats. I think we'll see that when they will do the measurement. From us, 1 day disruption in the payment systems is not too big. At this point, at least, we haven't seen that. We have yet to assess. So I hope that helps you to understand. This issue is live, and the active measures are being taken to avoid that. Obviously, it's not a good thing to have such an arrangement broken down. We have invested quite a lot as a country in these border posts. So the idea was to facilitate trade. Now, no sooner have we done that, if that this disruption happens, is not good for flow. And it's also not good for AfCFTA, this African Continental Free Trade Area, because that's what we are moving to. Now, if we start blocking this, then how will we embark on that continent-wide level? I hope that addresses your question. I'll ask the Deputy Governor here to weigh in on the credit growth to the private sector, to shed some light on that. Please. Or we can ask you.
Maybe Jonathan can just say something.
Okay.
Am I audible? Okay, yeah, sure, thank you. Thank you, Governor. So the expansion in private sector credit is mostly for firms and households to meet rising costs. And also, this information we are getting from the surveys that we do on a quarterly basis, and we publish the report on the website on credit conditions. So the other area that they are demanding for credit is to meet, to invest in alternative energy sources because of shortages of electricity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take 3 from the online audience, and then we'll come back to the auditorium. The first question, Governor, is from Oliver Izukanji Simumba. And he says, the last Monetary Policy Committee announcement indicated that the monetary policy rate would continue to increase if inflation data showed an upward trend. Given that average actual inflation is at 15.3% and projected at 13.7%, has the central bank shifted its primary focus away from curbing inflation, which remains more than 2% above the MPR? The second question, in light of the growing concern of El Nino effects on the economy, is there a consideration for relief funds through commercial banks to aid access to financing for various MSMEs, corporates, and retail clients? The third, from Melvin Hatchpuka. How has the financial leakage, as reported in the FIC report, amounting to over 10 billion kwacha, affected the monetary policy, and what would be your advice to government? Governor, maybe you may take those.
Okay. I reached out to the actual statement that we issue, and there is a standard language we have to. Who answered? This is Oliver. Yes, if you read that statement carefully, at the bottom we say decisions on the policy rate will continue to be guided by inflation outcomes, forecasts, and the identified risks, including those associated with financial stability. The bank stands ready to take appropriate action should inflation persist to be above the target band. I think the operative word is appropriate action. I think I don't know if you got the impression that by appropriate action we meant that it will only be adjusting the rate upwards when this happens. I think we are on record to indicate that our decisions are based on our reading of the data. What are we getting from the market, from the players, yourselves and others? What are you seeing? So what the word appropriate means is that you are going to make an assessment of the situation and then make a decision. And this is what we have done in this particular instance and in any of our area decisions. We make a full assessment of what is going on in the economy and then decide what is the appropriate decision to make. So this time is no different. It's just that, yes, and we are the first to admit that the inflation, both in outturn and projection, is rising. But we are not oblivious to other developments that are happening in the economy. So it's not just moving the policy rate for its own sake. The rate movement is supposed to deliver some outcome which is positive to the economy. So right now, we are engulfed in a very, very difficult situation. This is unprecedented drought that we have experienced as a country in a long time. So everywhere where you turn, in fact, even many of you are complaining that credit is tight. Yes, there has been some growth, but it's not sufficient to turn the economy around. So we have all said that we have to put our heads together. How do we address this particular shock, which is quite devastating in agriculture, in energy, and many other areas? So this should not in any way be interpreted as us shifting away from our primary mandate. We remain still very much committed to meeting that target. But in every situation, you have to assess where you are and make the decision that best suits the conditions that you are operating under. So I hope that Mr. Simumba helps to put your concern at ease. We haven't shifted from focusing on our primary mandate of price stability. There are other measures which we have taken. Like I said, 6 quarters in a row, we raised the policy rate. But inflation continues going up. Why? Because the factors that are pushing it are not as amenable to the policy rate alone. It requires other measures. So that's why we are highlighting here the policy rate. 6 times we have raised it. The statutory reserve ratio, we have raised it significantly. We have also made reforms in the foreign exchange market. The fiscal consolidation that is also going on is another very important factor in moderating inflation. So all these are moving parts which are still to deliver on the objectives for which they are being implemented. So that's where we stand. We have not shifted from our mandate, but we are actually using our mandate, we believe, in an appropriate way. Then the relief fund, again, you see, this is connected to this. Yes, we announced already that we have actually approved, ready to go, if we get players who can be innovative to provide that liquidity. Credit guarantee fund. We have a fund of about 5 billion kwacha already there, but we are looking for avenues of how to disperse this to the market, and the modalities of doing this. We are at an advanced stage in terms of rolling this. We should be, before, I think maybe DG can explain better here, because he's the person we have given the matter to run with. Maybe you chip in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think just to confirm that we had announced this, and I think in the context of even the budget, the Minister of Finance had included this, that we have been working on trying to basically address one of the things we found during the COVID period, and when we tried to provide support to the market. It was very clear that for many small businesses, they were not able to get credit really at an affordable cost. And there were many issues which go into why they were not able to do that, the risks which we know are there in the financial sector. So the thinking was that we partner with private sector players who can say, can we design a structure in which we're really addressing in a holistic way the challenges which small businesses face in accessing credit. And there are many, from both the risks from management, and those risks are both on the demand side, the individuals themselves, but also on the supply side in terms of the risks which the commercial banks face. And so, as Governor has indicated, we were working with the National Advisory Board on Impact Investment. We have more or less, I think it was last week, we had discussed the final framework for this report internally. And obviously from this point now, we're going to discuss that with other key stakeholders in terms of how we roll out the policy. And the basic point is that we do want to focus especially on some of the more challenging areas, agriculture, which is particularly relevant now in the context of the drought. So the way in which we do this, though, we were very clear that we wanted to make sure that a lot of the past design problems, which meant that many of these sort of schemes didn't really work, either because the financial institutions, even if you gave them a guarantee fund, wouldn't actually lend it to the small business, or because on the demand side we also didn't do enough in working with the small businesses to develop their own management, whether it's their accounting, books of accounts, whether it's linking them to markets, and so on. So this structure which we have been working on really aims to have a more holistic approach to this. And as Governor has indicated, we had meetings last week. We're going to be now discussing with some of our other key stakeholders, including the financial institutions more broadly, and then we'll be rolling that out.
Yeah, thank you very much, TG. The last question was from Melvin, where is finding out if the reported financial leakage by FIC that so much money is being taken out illegally. The obvious answer to that, yes, it affects, but it affects other things even more. You know, it affects the economy in that money could have been used to do a number of things in the economy. That means tax was not paid, which means that the revenue was not realized. And why do we collect revenue? Why does the government collect revenue? Is to spend in public programs. So that means that whole thing went out without really being utilized. But that's one of the things that we have to all be alert to. There's not to be complicity in schemes that externalize money illegally. I'm sure you have seen some of the arrests that have been made, or some of the attempts to get money out. This is an ongoing battle, but it's a battle not just for law enforcement agencies, but for all of us as people who are concerned. You are law-abiding citizens. You pay your taxes appropriately. You want services from the government. But other people just come and then steal your lunch, as it were, while you are watching. It's not to be allowed. So, indeed, we are working with other agencies to see how we can close some of these loopholes which are utilized. But remember, these things are done with the collaboration of many Zambians. These people don't just do it on their own. Some people do aid and abet this. When you don't report, you are actually abetting as well. You know, so this is something which we must be alive to, that it can ruin economies if it continues that way. It means all these resources we are saying we have as a country, they are not benefiting us if others can just come in and take away. So it must cause some anger in us to fight it. So it affects us, but we are not quantifying it here. But the fact that this has left a big hole you know. No matter how much it is, if it is going away, it's a leakage, as you pointed out, which means that it's not available to the economy, and the monetary policy will be effective if there is activity in the economy. Remember, inflation fight is not for inflation for its own sake. It's meant to safeguard the purchasing power of the money that you earn. So if inflation continues to go up, it means that the purchasing power of that money you are earning is eroded. Now, if someone is not paying taxes, it means that certain projects, certain programs will not go on, which means that the effectiveness of monetary policy will also be affected. So these are some of the linkages we ought to see. It may not appear immediately apparent to you if someone is stealing from the public that no, it's them. It's affecting you, because later when you want to get medicine from the hospital, you'll be told there is no medicine. Why? Because there's no money to pay for it. You know, you want to get fuel. Well, the system is not able to mobilize the resources like we have now, electricity shortage. We need money. But if you others are just stealing it like that, they are stealing from all of us. It's not just one person. So I hope this will be a call to action by all of us. When you see wrong, say something. When you hear strange noises, say something. It is going to help us. Many of these things which are foiled is by patriotic Zambians who report when they see something, sometimes at great risk to them, to themselves, but they know that it's important to make that report. So this is a message to all of us, a wake-up call that we have a duty to, as citizens, we have a civic responsibility. This is one of them. I hope that clarifies that question.
Thank you very much, Governor. We get back to the auditorium. We can take 3 questions.
Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Mutale Samo from the Zambian Business Times newspaper. So with regards to the exports tracking framework, I just wanted to get an update how far you have gone and as far as actualizing it is concerned.
You can get the next one.
Good morning, Governor. My name is Kalunga Mwape from Millennium Radio. My question is based on the fact that you've alluded to the fact that the strategy that you've been using to arrest the inflation rate actually has not yielded results. For the past 6 quarters, you've been raising the monetary policy rate and it hasn't yielded any results. And you also raised the statutory reserve ratio, which same did not produce any results in arresting the inflation, which has continued to run away from you trying to arrest it. Are you considering revising the strategy that you've been using to arrest this inflation? And of course, consider engaging stakeholders from the private sector. I've been saying to say, you need to engage them so that you can revise the strategy, because the strategy that you've been using for quite a long time now has not been working. And there are concerns to say the number of the inflation rate at this particular time does not really correlate with what is happening on the ground. Saying to say the inflation is likely to somewhere be around 35% and not the 15%. I don't know what your comment on that is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can get the last question. I can't believe that we don't have questions.
Online.
There's a hand here.
Good afternoon, Governor. How is the central bank addressing the challenge of making capital accessible for infrastructure investment in the energy sector, as government promotes the transition of households, offices and commercial centers to off-grid power in view of the energy deficit that the country is currently facing? Thank you.
Okay. She didn't give us her name. Her name. She didn't give us her name.
Cecilia. Your name? Cecilia from Money FM.
Ketra Kalunga from Times of Zambia once again. We'd like to find out the role that the Bank of Zambia is playing in encouraging green bond issuance.
Thank you. Governor, you may take those questions.
Thank you very much for the questions. The Mutale, some of the EBOP tracking framework, I think I'll ask you, you did your, you can, okay, please.
No, thank you very much, Governor. So the EBOP tracking framework is operating reasonably well. Basically, I think we've explained before what it actually means. So we are essentially receiving information on the trade side in terms of when people export, and this is coming from the ZRA databases. We're also receiving information from our side, from the commercial banks, when individuals and businesses transact with the rest of the world, when they're making payments and receiving money. And we're bringing these two databases together to compare. So what we've seen under the framework so far, since it was launched in January, in terms of sort of the total export value, we've had something like 6.5, 6.6 billion, which has been reported on the system in terms of the trade data. When we look at the financial flows which we have, the export receipts, because we also had the export tracking framework, which is part of that. If we look at the export receipts, the value which we've received in the banking sector, we've had about 4.1 billion, which is what we've received so far. Now, the whole point of the framework is to reconcile these two databases so that we can say when this export was taken out, we can see that this money which came in was related to those exports which were done. So that's where the reconciliation, the export receipts we've received are 4 billion. The reconciliation process, we still have a bit of a way to go. I think the amounts reconciled are still only about 2 billion. Partly it's because we have not yet fully implemented the services side. Right now we're concentrating on the goods side. So obviously once we can implement the services side, which we hope to do by January next year, then we should have a better able to reconcile all of the export proceeds which we've had. So out of the 4 billion export proceeds we've seen, we've reconciled about 2 billion. But the other area which we are working on is that we also need to be able to track imports. So for example, somebody says they're taking money out, we can track the money they're taking out. But they may say this money is out because I imported goods and services before. There isn't a way in which we can reconcile that indeed the money which you're sending out is for those imports which we imported. So that's the other pillar which we are going to be implementing. And once we do all of those three things, you will have really a 360-degree understanding of all of our payments out of the country and into the country. And that should help us really be able to reconcile a lot of things internally. We think it will help in us understanding the flows and what we would be expecting to happen in foreign exchange flows, for example. It should help us in terms of understanding tax issues and tax compliance. So there's a whole host of things which we think we'll be able to do when the system is fully implemented in terms of all its components. But so far, it is working well, and the teams continue to develop that process.
Okay. Thank you very much. I didn't get the name for the gentleman who was saying that the framework we are using is not working. Could I get the name?
Kalunga Mwape from Millennium Radio.
Oh, thank you very much, Kalunga. Yeah. I think that's an extreme position you have taken to say that the framework is not working. I think you have to look in relative terms, or maybe the way we put this is do the counterfactual, which means that supposing we didn't have this, what would have happened? Put those two together. Then look at what has been happening to the economy over this period. First, you had more recent, I would take just the more recent issues. You had COVID-19. What did it do? It disrupted globally supply chains. That was a general problem to all countries. Zambia was not spared. In fact, Zambia, we are made worse off because we already had a problem going on. The debt overhang was already very strong. If you look at our earlier statements, you clearly see what we are talking about, the debt problem, the issue of fiscal consolidation, the rising fiscal deficits. I think contextualize that. Then COVID, while it is raging, there was politics, the war, Ukraine. Who would have imagined that that war would still be going on today? It affects us because we have roots to the thing. Before that could end, you have the problem in the Gulf. Two issues in the Suez Canal issues. Logistics are affected. We get our oil from far off. Then before you could even breathe, drought has set in. So the framework is being applied in an environment which is not normal. There are so many intervening factors. In fact, if I call your attention to the statement that we issue, we will tell you that we are looking at how inflation is going, it has been, where it's going, and what are the risks. So I think if you look at the risks that we highlight and come to me and say that, no, these are not real, then maybe we can have a different conversation. But if they are real, then I think you have to re-examine the characterization that the framework hasn't worked. Yes, it hasn't on and by itself brought inflation to the desired target. Why? Because the drivers of inflation is not just money, which is what the monetary policy rate is doing. There are other leakages. We have told you, food accounts for over 50% of the CPI. Now, what can the rate do there, if you ask yourself? If there is no food that is produced and supplied, what can it do on its own? Unless the people who are producing food step up. You and I, if we have a what are we growing? Those are the issues. Right now, this time of the year, we usually have support in the vegetables and all that, the prices. But if you look in the statement, vegetables is one of the prices of vegetables, one of the drivers of inflation. Why? Because not many people are producing vegetables. Is it because of the drought, or is it other structural matters where we used to see farmland, we are seeing housing. So where is the food production happening? So these are some of the things you must ask yourself, and that's why we are saying, like in the statement, we are saying that implementation of other structural measures are equally important for the framework to hold. Monetary policy is a short-term tool which helps you to organize yourself with the bigger policy tools, such as fiscal, such as structural, such as economic policy generally. So all these are expected to work together. If some are falling behind, one policy alone would not deliver. There is no silver bullet in what we are doing. It's calls for concerted efforts. So I would entreat you to look at the relative contribution of this. It's not on and by itself going to save that. So hopefully you take time to read our monetary policy statement, which we issued earlier this year, and see the factors which are at play, and look, if you are absent that, do the counterfactual assessment. What would have happened if we didn't do what we did? The relative macro stability that we are saying, yes, inflation is 15%, but look at other countries too. Don't just look at us. Look at also how are others faring, and maybe you get a better sense of what is happening. Now here it is, we are saying, can we use our kwacha for the local thing, the APRO? No, we are import dependent. How are we going to change that narrative that we are also now exporters rather than just being importers? All those affect the effectiveness of monetary policy. We, earlier this year, tried to move balances from the central bank, from the commercial banks to the central bank. What happened? Banks pushed back because they said they did. But that money was being used to buy government paper, which means that the government was borrowing its own money again. So all these are leakages in the system, which is more recently, just now someone raised about the leakages in financial flows. All these are factors that you must take into account. Inflation is a price, aggregate price. It takes from all aspects of the economy. So if there is wrongdoing somewhere, it will pop up somewhere. And monetary policy is not designed to address those things. That's why these structural measures are being taken to augment the effectiveness of monetary policy. So I would argue, contrary to your saying that monetary policy has failed, yes, we have not managed to bring the rate by itself because the drivers of that are outside the reach of monetary policy per se. This is why we are talking of also go cashless. Why are we doing about that? It's because the informal sector is quite huge. When we issue currency, I don't know if you have had a chance to see our officers traverse the breadth and width of this country delivering money. A lot of cash is being demanded. When that cash leaves the bank, much of it doesn't come back. It stays in the mattresses or cash transactions. What is happening? All these are matters. So when we are putting these reforms, is really to get the economy to a point where when you do a change like we are proposing here, it has wider impact. But now it has limited impact because of some of these leakages. So our statement is holistic, is that monetary policy alone will not do it, but we need other policy measures to accompany it, and together we'll be able to make some progress. In fact, we have seen a very important progress recently. Just last week, we are appearing before Parliament together with the Minister of Finance, who is pushing the fiscal side. And these questions were being asked by our parliamentarians. Are we coordinating? And I think the answer is yes, we are coordinating, but a lot more still needs to be done. We have the green paper now going on, which is being debated, and the budget will come. So all these things, don't see them in isolation. They go hand in hand. If we are failing in one side, it will have tailing effects in the other side. I don't know, some of you may know, who knows how to catch mice, if I may ask? Huh? What happens when you go to catch mice? Huh? Those who are experienced, they will look for holes, close all those holes, right? And then you go to one where they will put the smoke So when the mice is trying to go the other side, it can't go, it has to come back to the thing. Now, look at the economy that way. If we are putting this pressure, but there are these unclosed holes, it means that that pressure you are applying won't deliver the result you are looking for. I think that's one imagery you can picture for yourself to see. Even if you are pressing something, but there is a leakage, it won't always putting water in a bucket which is leaking. You can pour as much water as you want. It won't, that bucket won't get full. So look at it that way. Then to say inflation is higher than 15%, I think don't be, especially as a reporter, don't take these things at face value. You must ask very penetrating questions, because our official authority for statistics in Zambia is the Zambia Statistics Agency. Now, you should inquire how is inflation compiled. Then it will give you a sense, a better sense of understanding whether someone can just sit in the room here and give you that figure. You remember that chart? Can you? I don't know if you are able to show that charts I showed, where there is the quarter commodities and the other one which is showing July. This chart I was giving you, this. Look at the number. This is not exhaustive, the number of commodities which are shown there. So this very chart on the screen now. Now, this information is obtained from outlets across the country, right? So every month, colleagues from Zamstat actually visit the same outlet and get information on the same commodity. We do that on a weekly basis, on a sample basis. Now, tell me that this is fake, then I will believe you. But if you can't give me a contrary thing, then we have an issue there, because this to us is what gives us the information. You get actually average. I don't know if you have taken time to look at the monthly report which is produced by Zamstat. At the back of that report, go and see what is the methodology which is used to compile that information, and then compare that to someone who is going to give you that this is that just a few, or it's really grounded in some real work that has gone on in giving that information. If the answer you get there satisfies you, then believe them that the 50% is correct. But from our standpoint, it's deliberate that the government made it that the entity that produces those figures is separate and is independent by law. You know, they compile that and they give that information. Now we have an established tradition. The last Thursday of every month, they will give you that figure. So question, ask them if the figure that they are giving us is the wrong one. If they say, yeah, sorry, we have been giving it wrong, then we stand to revise where we stand. But as far as we are concerned, that's the official statistic, and it follows the methodology which others also use. So it's reviewed every now and then. So until we hear otherwise from Zamstat, we stand by the figure that they have given us. Remember, you see, you take these things lightly. When arriving at the budget figure, these figures are used actually to look at what is the envelope the government has to collect in terms of taxes. So if we are talking of 50%, then it means we have been underperforming in a whole lot of areas. Is that the correct position? I think as a reporter, inquire into that and see whether it makes sense to say that inflation is 50, or someone is just being dramatic and sensational. Thank you. I think those were the questions.
No,
there was one
on
green bond, yes.
On green bonds. I
And
think on
the
the green bonds, of course, the bonds are regulated by the SEC, the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, because obviously these are issued on the capital markets. I think in that green space, we are working together with the SEC. We do have a working group working together with the government. So we're basically trying to coordinate. They have issued green bond guidelines. We have also issued green loan guidelines for the financial sector, and we're encouraging them to use this regulatory framework to help actually invest in green products. There are a lot of issues involved there. There's questions of definition and measurement and so on. So we have guidelines out there in terms of what the commercial banks can do, but SEC, who deal with green bonds, have their guidelines there as well, and we're working together through the working group we have to encourage these things. Sense to business that the financial sector can lend more. That's part of a regulatory issue. It's part of making sure that we can get to a point at which we get inflation down, that we can have relative stability in the foreign exchange market. So those goals are important because eventually they will enable commercial banks to lend. But we have seen for sure that the loan-to-deposit ratio, which is one way of thinking about how well is the financial sector transferring savings to actually investments and loans out there in the real economy, how well is that working? This ratio has been coming down from maybe over 70%. Now we think it's around 40% overall, but for US dollar loans, I think it's a bit less, maybe 32% or so. So that's something, a conversation which we have been having with the commercial banks to say, how can we try and get more lending going? Of course, the current environment is particularly challenging because with drought and so on, the risks to businesses are more. But we are working with them to try to do that. And even in the credit guarantee mechanism we're trying to make sure that it can deal with some of these challenges which commercial banks have in terms of managing risk. And so we're hoping that that will help. And we're also hoping that we can add a focus on green.
At a small scale level, I think they are responding to this challenge quite well. They are offering what is called asset loans, where you can get actually items, solar, generators and all that, which they have terms. Maybe that's the issue, maybe the cost of that, but I think they are positioning themselves to provide payment terms, some even up to 5 years, that you can get this. We are encouraging them that, what about the people who are not in regular employment? Because it seems the focus tends to be on people who are in regular employment who get salaries. What about those who don't get regular salary? The question is, the tariff also sometimes discourages people, because the tariff, much as we say that it's very expensive, but for return on capital, people feel that that is still not cutting it, won't cross to the other side. So sometimes you bite the bullet and you get the thing. Now, we have this shortage of power. It's so painful because it's extended the crisis that we are in. But it means this is the thing we're talking about. How do we prepare ourselves as a country to manage these shocks and be resilient to shocks of this
audience? But maybe just one last one from our online audience, if we can do it in 3 minutes. With early warning signals of a potential global recession emerging in markets, employment...
It's a technical term. If an economy is recording negative growth in 2 consecutive quarters. More recently, I think is the UK's growth is growth. And if you look at it from the mass that you are talking about there, 3% growth, and therefore they relax monetary policy, which is adversely affecting us through these tight monetary conditions. So
Zambian Monitor, Mwebantu Media, and everyone else who has covered this briefing, who was streaming live. We really appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Until next time, have a blessed day. God bless. May we be upstanding and allow for the governor and his entourage to leave the auditorium.
With a bank or any other institution, the repayment remains the same. You know, when policy rate is increased to 16, some sort of relief there on the lending institutions. But of course, we have also had another positive sentiment from the Bank of Zambia governor, where he has mentioned that we did see in the second quarter of this year, the mining sector pay about $252 million in terms of taxes, compared to 190 million that was paid in the first quarter of already started, operating here in Zambia. We have seen quite a number of institutions that have been paid, the councils, and many others. So it is a positive sentiment, and because of what is happening in the sector, in the economy, to stabilize things. So hopefully where we are going with other mines, Luansha mine and KC now in the first quarter, and this has been attributed to the fact that we did see, the International Monetary Fund release about 569.6 million kwacha to Zambia through the United States dollar. There was, an increase in the second quarter of about 8.6 million, from what they collected, and the total now from the time they started buying goods is about 100, most of it here. And of course, we know that government this year on 1st of January 2024 started implementing the export procedure in sector. I've heard, Deputy Governor update us to say the framework has so far indicated about 6.6 billion was recorded on the trade debt paid in the country. It's not a bad thing from January to now, 6.6 billion. That's quite a huge amount, which has been recorded on the data, 4.1 billion already. That has been accounted for by the coming. So this has been the update here at the Bank of Zambia in Lusaka, where the Bank of Zambia governor and others who sit on the policy rate committee were giving us an update on the decision they've made in the third quarter. So keep watching Diamond TV as we now shift to and other stories across the country. So just keep watching Diamond TV. This is Prudence Chotan. We were streaming live here in Lusaka. For now, it's bye and God bless you.